All right, welcome everybody. Good to see you here. Thank you for making it to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm very proud of you after seeing many of you last night. It is a miracle that, that you've been able to be awake and alive. Thank you for coming here today. This is, as you know, for anybody who has sat through any panel that I've done, I am a data geek. I love understanding, and I really love the private lending space. And I love other people who are data geeks. And so I wanted to do, typically for panels, I'm usually up here putting out information that I think is pertinent for the industry. So for example, what are the interest rates in various markets? And there's a lot of PowerPoint slides that come alongside with it. And for this one, I really wanted to kind of get a bit of an understanding from an operator's perspective about how do people look at the data within their own industry? This is still such an extremely entrepreneurial space in which the gut instinct is very good, and by all means, you guys are going to operate your business from a gut instinct perspective. But this is also a industry that is becoming professionalized very quickly, and a lot of that professionalization is understanding your own data and how to think about tracking it, and some of that's kind of just basic KPIs, and some of it's also kind of thinking a little bit outside the box. And so when I thought about this panel, the only way that I was going to do it was if the two gentlemen that are on stage with me were willing to do it with me, because I have profound respect for both of them. I know them both well, and I know the way that they think about data and the energy and effort that they've put through it. So I wanted you all to kind of get an idea of people who really have taken this approach, taken it aggressively and taken it seriously, the way they think about data, and hopefully you can walk away from here kind of understanding a couple things where you might walk away from here going, you know what, I really think that we should start, we're gonna take this back into our own business and we're gonna try this approach. That's my goal for you all today, and I'm extremely excited for it. So before we jump in too much further here, my name is Nema Daghbandan, for those that don't know who I am. I'm the CEO of Lightning Docs, which is an online platform that generates business purpose loan documents for both DSCR loans as well as for fix and flip and ground up or whatever. And so we generate loan documents. Our sole users of that system are private lenders such as yourself. We have a little over 200 active users in the system. Last month, we just broke our record. We had 3,333 loans and a little less than, or $1.8 billion of origination run through it. So super pumped about that, and obviously we put out a lot of data as it presents on that system, and if you ever follow our LinkedIn or anything like that, you'll see those data points. But that's a little bit about me. I'm also a partner with Jurasi LLP. That's the company running this whole event, and you probably haven't seen a lot of my partners around the day-to-day. And so why don't we go next to you, Jake? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Backflip?
Sure, thanks for having me. And this is just a great name for the panel, Mind Your Own Business. I see what you did there, creative. So I'm Jake, COO and co-founder of a company called Backflip. We're a venture-backed technology company that kind of happens to sit in this private lending space. Our mission, just put very simply, is to empower local entrepreneurs to rejuvenate homes, so people can love where they live. It's a really fun problem to be working on, and an important one. And being sort of technology slanted, we do, think about data all the time. We consider ourselves a data company as much as anything else. We have technology products and capital products. The technology products, I can get into it a little more later, but think of it like Zillow with investor goggles on. So type in an address, we curate a comp set, suggest what the property could be worth after repair, and help the borrower, your prospective borrower, do a financial underwriting, understand levered and unlevered returns, trying to educate them, through something other than YouTube gurus, which is where a lot of them are learning today about what kind of sophisticated risk-adjusted returns could look like. So I think of the app that we have as, like a distributed data collection device. We've got more than 35,000 members that are tapping away at it daily. So data is a big part of what we do, and we're relatively new on this scene. This is my third conference now with you guys, and we started really in 2021, and so it's been a pretty interesting couple of years, to say the least, but things are going well.
I'm Eric Abramovich. I'm one of the co-founders of Rock 360. We are a national lender to real estate investors, to residential real estate investors. We fund fix and flip, ground up, and DSCR loans. We've been at this since 2014. We've organically funded in the $15 billion range, but through some acquisitions of some brands. Our brands collectively to date have funded north of $25 billion in residential investor loans. I would say data is in my DNA. My father is an engineer, or was an engineer. He's retired. I remember at a very early age talking about probabilities at the dinner table.
Don't we all?
I don't know, but that was natural for us. And then I had two boys. I have two boys, and then I'm thinking, I want to have a girl, and naturally the thought is, well, what is the probability that I'm going to have three boys? Well, it's 0.5 cubed, right? So 12.5%. And I thought that's a very low probability. It makes sense to have a third child. I want a girl, and guess what? We had a girl, so the probability was low. And even this past weekend, I was teaching my 11-year-old son to count cards. So we were playing blackjack with one deck, and I was trying to explain to him the probability, depending on prior cards that came out, how to count cards. And so that was, it's definitely part of my DNA. I then went and got a degree in finance, math, and actuarial science. And my two business partners, well, one of them I went to school with, but my senior business partner has a PhD in computer science. So data is definitely fundamental to the way we think and what we do. And in fact, Rock has a data science team of north of 10 people, and it is very integral in all of our processes, and I look forward to talking about those things here.
And just to reiterate kind of one point that you just made, Jake, which is that, for a lot of people in the room that may not have picked up on this is kind of your foray into this is that you've effectively created a real estate investor app. That's the Backflip app. And that is serving many different functions for you. One, it's a data collection tool because you can now track all the activity. If you're a real estate investor, what properties are they looking at? How many are they looking at? And then, do you want to actually renovate this property as a prospect? Guess what? There's this company called Backflip Lending that can also provide you real-time financing. So when they're trying to understand what is their kind of after financing return, they're seeing in real time what they're getting. Is that kind of a good summation of what you've all built?
That's correct. The originator is called Double Backflip, very creatively. And so they see the unlevered and levered returns and then the leverage assumptions, that are in there, kind of bridging the gap, are loan products that we provide and they qualify for based on information that we have about them. So it's, it's a pretty nifty sort of top of the funnel tool. Our relationship with the customer starts, well in advance of them, applying for a loan on a specific property. And so someone downloads the app, it's free, which is really nice, but they got to give us a bunch of information about themselves that help us qualify them as a prospective, good borrower. And we can do that by saying, hey, this person has the characteristics of that person who we know very well. And so most likely this person is going to act like that person and we should spend time on them. And then we've been able to garner other insights, like one of my favorites is someone usually underwrites 10 properties before submitting a loan application. And so, that's pretty reliable. And so on the 9th property that they underwrite, if they're one of our ICPs or ideal customer personas, we tell a business development person, you should call that person because he's about to submit a loan app. And it doesn't, when we first figured that out, we were like, oh, this is really cool. But that's really just the beginning, right? So the loan application, we now are getting thousands of loan applications a month. That doesn't, we can't nearly address all of those. And so we need to then qualify them, and we use data to do that, right? So, our app suggests some comps. If someone just takes what our app suggests, doesn't click anything, doesn't spend time on it, doesn't study it, they're probably not going to be that diligent and not that good of a borrower. On the contrary, if someone clicks into all the comps, if they change the rehab budget, if they study the pictures, if they're really spending time on it, if they're sharing it with counterparties, do we know those counterparties? Are those good borrowers? Like, there's this entire sort of breadcrumb, data landscape that we can use to basically qualify these leads and decide, who to spend time on.
Perfect. And so, obviously I'm going to make an assumption for most of the people in the room that you're not going to be hiring 20 data scientists or starting in a real estate investor application, but I wish the two gentlemen heavy success in how they're doing it. So let's break this down into the more kind of tangible, practical aspects of this, right? So, before we had an opportunity to get on a phone call together and just get an understanding of, let's break this down into the different parts of your business, right? And where KPIs should exist or can exist. And let's kind of talk about some of the ones that we've created internally here. So the first kind of big bucket that I've got here that we're going to go into is kind of customer acquisition process, right? So what are we tracking on that side of it? Let's first look into kind of the marketing and sales side of the business. So, why don't we, kind of first look into, how does data inform customer insights and strategy? Why don't you walk me through that one, Jake?
Yeah, I think what I just described was kind of half the answer to that question. A little bit further up funnel when we're meeting them is the propensity at which they're analyzing properties. That's really the very top of our funnel on our go-to-market engine. And I think I looked just before this, in the last 3 months, there's been over 50,000 properties, like $25 billion worth of analysis that have been run. And then from those translates to the loan application. And it really allows us to be just sort of predictive in where we're putting resources. And like I said earlier, we've got way more members on the app than we know what to do with. And so without the data, we would be, the metaphor I think of as like running around a cave in the dark, sort of trying to figure out where to focus resources. And so this is, I couldn't imagine doing it without a data science team, to be quite frank.
And then for you, Eric, in terms of, obviously the available external data sources now are massive. And so, you kind of have this endless supply of data. What are you doing? What sort of data sources are you pulling from to kind of inform your marketing strategy?
Well, first of all, I hate to break it to everyone in the audience. You probably know it already, but your borrower lists are public information. Everyone has them. Reverse engineering them isn't really that difficult. Every mortgage is recorded in the public record. And yeah, in our space, there are entities behind. The borrowers are actually the entities, but there are then ways to crack those entities and figure out who the borrowers are. And of course, there's a bit of reverse engineering that you have to do to get to the contact information of the borrowers. But there are so many cool platforms that you can look at to get that data and to triangulate around the contact info of the borrower. By the way, just having a borrower list doesn't really do much. You have to have a fantastic platform, a great product, a good sales team, hopefully better to have a good product. But just having borrower lists isn't the end-all be-all. And frankly, I've learned a lot over the years about marketing and digital marketing. I used to think, wow, if you just have a borrower list, you've got it all. Well, that's entirely not true. Even digital marketing, you would think that, oh, well, if you could get your ads right in front of the people that are of interest to you, go right directly to the borrower.
How could they not sign up? Yeah. I said, how could they not sign up?
How could they not sign up?
Right.
Especially when you're a lender, your product is cash. You're giving cash. It's like giving candy to a child. Well, it's not so easy, by the way. And so you've got to be more sophisticated around the usage of data and how, when do they need it? What is the intent behind it? Like, there are other sources of data, like trigger data from the credit bureaus. They readily sell data like that. So you can try to figure out when borrowers need the data. You can also try to figure out when their cash utilization or when their debt utilization is high. That could be a problem on the lending side, right? Do you want to lend to someone with high debt utilization? Or maybe that's when they actually need the cash. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. You have to think about that. There's a treasure trove of data in the public securitizations that are happening.
Walk me through that. So let's look at the securitization. What is in the securitization data that is the treasure trove from your perspective?
Well, in general, the data is segmented. Like it doesn't have like client data specifically, but it has sort of segmented data like credit.
The average FICO score of the people in the securitization is X.
Things like that.
Right.
The geographic profile of the loans and so on. And so, but when you combine all of these things together, right, you start to get a feel for what the market is doing, what kind of loans are being made, at what rates, what is the credit profile of the borrower, how does my portfolio compare to that public securitization data, performance data, right? Performance data is out there. And all these things, when you kind of bring them together, you get a sort of holistic view of the space.
So are you effectively kind of building a dashboard in the background, which is saying, hey, here's what we're seeing. Let's just pull on that thread for securitization data for a second, which is we're seeing on average right now that average FICO scores are X. So that's one data point that we're going to kind of track. And where do we benchmark against this? We're seeing that the concentrations in California, the average loan amount 675. Like, what are you actually looking at, and how are you using that to internally benchmark what you're doing?
That's a great word. That benchmarking is exactly what we're using it for. We're getting a feel for what others are doing, and we're trying to understand if what we're doing sort of makes sense or corresponds to what's happening out in the market. Not that we're trying to originate exactly what others are originating, but
sure. But and of those kind of sources that you just identified, is there one where you kind of can reflect back on as an operator and go, oh, this was kind of our aha moment. This one was when we never really came upon, or we started looking at it in a different way. Was there anything where you go, guys, like we really need to start looking at this, and this needs to become a metric that we'll track?
You mean our secret sauce and the top secret data?
100%, yeah.
That we have.
Yes.
Should we talk about those?
Yes, that exactly.
I mean, there was never really an aha moment. It's kind of like years of learning and putting together the data sets and sort of trying to really get a feel for what's happening in the market. It was never just, hey, I got it. I mean, it's been many. By the way, the data is very expensive.
Correct.
Right? So we're paying for all these sources of data, just the deed recording data. I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on an annual basis. So like our data budget is definitely north of $1 million.
Right. And I mean, but of the ones you've used, of the data sources, right, which is the one that you think that added the most value to your business?
I mean, I think the public mortgage recording data is definitely, that gives us a feel of what's happening in the market. It doesn't have interest rate data, but we can size the market essentially. So we know how big, we know the size, the total addressable market of the place of the space that we play in, and we know if it's growing or has it declined. So it definitely helped us through COVID. It helped us through 22 when interest rates were going up. And by the way, it's really interesting. The data shows that today the market is back to where it was in 2019, just pre-COVID. So you would think that, in this interest rate environment, rates have gone up so much. The housing market itself is in a depression in terms of transaction count. But our space has been nicely insulated from that. And transaction volumes are just where they were pre-COVID.
And Jake, so much of your data is obviously on the internal side. Are there external data tracking things that kind of what Eric talked about there that you guys are very intensely focused on that are helping you make business decisions?
There are, and I'm glad you brought that up. Like the external data source is a great supplement for us, and we'll append it and be smarter because of it. We think that a data strategy is best if there's both, kind of internal and external, and the internal data is really what's unique to your business and can provide you with insights that you can use that nobody else can use because they're proprietary to your business. So
that's right.
I think that's an important aspect.
And that's something, at least speaking for myself, on the Lightning Doc side of what we do, you all have, I think, probably seen a lot of the internal mining of data for your purposes, right? Like I don't personally care what the interest rate of a loan is in North Carolina, and in Tampa, or what, it does not move my personal needle, and it will not give me another loan. But I know that you do, and I know that we've got 200 different data points, meaning 200 different users who are all transacting in that market. And so if I can tell you, hey, across 114 loans in this county at this time, here's what the average rate is, that helps you make a decision. So we obviously mine that data, but we're still an operating business that is still trying to grow our own business. So I can just kind of give you an analysis of kind of the way we think about our own internal data tracking. So I'll use the example of last month, which will, because I just did this exercise. So, we grew, it was our best month ever. We went from 2,861 files to 3,333 loans in the month. And so I'm trying to understand why the hell did that happen, right? Because we don't know what's going on. We have no visibility in terms of why was there a 20% growth in just that month. And then there was also a 74% growth year over year for that month. Similarly, could not understand the why, and really wanted to break that down. So in what we were doing, it was very much, okay, well, let's take a look across I can segment out from the data and say and this is no different than your business, which is how much of this was repeat business. So if I just look at let me take out any new customer that came in this relationship after July 1 of last year, right? So let's just pull them out of the data set. So how much of this 74% growth was simply a matter of looking at the exact same repeat users, and was it their volume growth that was driving this? And when you looked at the underlying data set, about 30% of the file growth occurred because simply our clients were doing better year over year. And it's probably the story of a lot of you right now, is about a 30% benchmark about how you're performing compared to 2023. And 2023 was not a banner year by all means, but it wasn't a terrible year. So we're experiencing pretty significant growth, and I'm sure Eric could give us all a nice thesis on why and how capital markets works. But 30% was because simply our clients were doing better, right? We could have done nothing and we would have gotten 30%. Another 30% was because some of those clients were choosing to use the system more, right? They were not using it for some reason, they were choosing to use it, so they expanded their use. But they themselves were not growing, right? And then the last 30% or so was of new customers, meaning a customer that signed up on or after July 1. But it was really this exercise that I think that so many of us are not doing in our own businesses, because you probably are experiencing a lot of that individual growth or maybe decline. Who the heck knows which way it's going? And there's not this effort to segment out the why. But you're sitting on the data, assuredly you are. And you could have done the exact same analysis on your own borrowers, on your own investors, on the same data points, and it's all kind of just sitting in there for you to harness that you may or may not do. So let's go into our next kind of topic here, which is understanding a little bit about kind of risk mitigation and the data point tracking on the risk mitigation side. So really credit underwriting and risk mitigation. So how does data help in credit underwriting?
By the way, are you a statistician or a lawyer? Because you're speaking in highly technical terms.
So I would have loved to have grown up in your family. I also spend time thinking about statistics and really do enjoy it myself personally. I'm a terribly boring person to hang out with, but yes.
Well, this space is really interesting in that it's actually in the very early stages. Like if you compare this space to even e-commerce, the platforms that are available to you, like Shopify, the shopping cart platforms that you could build your business on, provide so many of the metrics that people that are not statisticians can just look at and measure the performance of their business. We don't have that in the private lending space. Everything is so opaque. We don't fully understand what's going on. People really act on intuition, a lot on intuition. By the way, that's really important as well. You can't just be completely data-driven. Even with a team of 10 data scientists, sometimes they give you a bunch of data and a bunch of analysis, and you still can't make sense of it. And in the end, you have to use your intuition. But there have been some tools to answer your question that we've developed that really help us. I'll give you an example. We are a New York-based firm, and we started lending in our backyard in 2014. And there was this boom of lending happening in California. And we were just scratching our heads thinking, what kind of crazy people are making these multi-million-dollar loans? Because in New York, the collateral is more like apartments and things like that, and that's not part of the fix and flip world, and so we weren't lending against apartments, but the houses are not nearly as expensive as they are here on the West Coast. And we thought, wow, these people are really nuts. They're going to pay the price for this. Only when we developed a tool, an internal tool, a liquidity tool. So what it does is it measures the supply-demand dynamics in any zip code at a given price level. So you say, oh, well, a $3 million house in 90210, in zip code 90210, well, that flies off the market. That's really cheap, right? So there's more demand than there is supply, or there may not even be any supply at that. Are there any $3 million houses in Beverly Hills? I don't know, but
No.
Right, no. Right, so if you put one on the market, it would sell in a heartbeat, right? And so that's what we call a liquidity score. So Zillow has like a Zestimate, which is just the value. I think that's one-dimensional. I think a second dimension to value is how quick something would sell at a given value. And so we've created that sort of liquidity score. We actually provide it for every loan that's submitted in our system. It's automatically uploaded, and it's like a 8-page PDF that shows you all the supply, all the demand. It graphs all these various things, and we know, there was someone asking me about a deal in California, not 90210, but one of the expensive zips, and we don't love big loans, by the way. Big loans cause big problems in general, but it's a $5 million deal, and at that price point, that's a very, very liquid price point in that market, and frankly, it is a loan that we would look at and entertain for the right borrower. But data helped us get there. I do wonder how many California lenders were just acting on intuition, like just knowing the market, but not.
I mean, so my background, obviously, right, was being a real estate finance attorney in Orange County, California. Obviously, and our start was with California mortgage funds. And the business, at least back then, you're talking 2014, almost exclusively was I drive to the properties and I go see them, right? I mean, it was we were very much a regional business even back then. And so that it was not, I don't think that the data side of the business was not there. It was very much, I understand the various zip codes within Beverly Hills and I understand how this trades. And I suspect they had an intuition on that side of it, and a real good one in terms of what is that, your liquidity score. They probably had the same thing for themselves in penciling the story, which is, oh no, I know this house is going to fly off the market when they do it. But help me understand. I love that you've got your own, your liquidity score that you create. Does that translate at all in terms of the offering you're going to do? Will you offer a lower interest rate on it or a higher? Will you change your behavior, or you'll simply reject the loan? How do you take something like this and actually apply it, other than providing an interesting data point?
Well, so when we price our loans, we're pretty dynamic. There is a negotiation aspect. So it is possible that we'll get very aggressive on something that's highly liquid. On a property, when the collateral is very, very liquid, we're willing to get very, very aggressive. And so yes, it could change pricing, it could change leverage. We're willing to do max leverage, lowest pricing for the most liquid properties.
So that's, from your perspective, that is a true key metric that is being tracked here, and it's a very valuable number that's handed to you. How do you score it? What's is it like a 1 to 10? Like what is the?
I mean, we've spent years kind of perfecting that and thinking about it, but it's some combination of, number of sales in the market, days on market, number of sales at a given price point, number of houses on the market, so the supply, number of houses that sold in a given month. Like, you take all these factors together and you can generate.
But do you spit out like a literal number with the combination of those things thrown together, and we say the liquidity score is 72?
So internally we do, but we don't show that score itself. We just show the various factors to our clients.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would echo that. And first of all, just responding to your description of, I know you don't care about interest rates in Tampa specifically, but your customers do, and so that's why you report that out. It reminded me that, data and what's the objective with data is an important concept, and so I'll double click on underwriting in a second, but I think you can bifurcate it between data to benchmarking and that sort of stuff to make data-informed decisions. I agree completely that data-driven entirety is pretty risky, but data-informed and getting smarter and using it to be better is category one, and then category two would be sort of operational process improvements, value add, I'd say, and then value add could be, to the internal team, and like each different department within a company has its own version of what, data, driven value add looks like, and then most importantly to the customer, right? And so that's what we're trying to do with, having this app is like to be able to provide data to the customer, pay for a bunch of data, give it to the customer for free in a way that they can benefit from it, and truly think of it as a value add to their business.
And what are, just give me an idea of what I gave you my Tampa interest rate example. What is your Tampa interest rate example for your customer? What are you giving to them for free? What have you chosen to parse through and hand over to them?
So the like most magical feature is the comp set curation, within a couple of seconds. What we found was that our customers, if they didn't have MLS access, were writing down the property address. They're usually out in the field when they figure this stuff out because they're working on other homes. They then go home, put their kids down, have an extra hour, like try to get onto Zillow and Realtor and Redfin and like figure out what would be a good after repair comp. And like that takes 45 minutes per property if you really do it the right way. And we get our team together on offsites and we have everyone try to do it themselves without using the Backflip app. And it's hilarious how frustrated people get when they like can't figure it out. And then, so we do that in a couple of minutes. So the members end up looking at 10, 20, 30 times more opportunities. And like anything, if you have a larger top of funnel, you'll end up making a better decision because you're not going to get fatigued on underwriting and say, I'm just going to do this.
So you're fixated on, let me give you the opportunity to look at more transactions and to be able to analyze them more quickly so that you can make the decision on which one's the right one for you. That's the end target.
That's today what is the most valuable from the customer's perspective, but then what we're starting to do is bringing forward like studying Morningstar's guidance and property liquidity ratio and these things that are important to the capital markets and important to the risk profile of the loan that the borrower has never maybe even thought about, putting those into the palm of their hand. So when they're sizing the deal and underwriting the deal, we're kind of training them to say, oh, if you could just move a little bit into this box, you've got a reduced interest rate, for example.
That's really smart, right? You're basically seeing the writing on the wall and you're saying, look, there's both rated and unrated securitizations, particularly with rated. If I just track what's happening at the rated securitization level, meaning that they're building this kind of magical box in the background, which is it's this number of transactions, it's this FICO score, it's this box that they're basically building. And so if I can basically gear my investors to kind of understand what is that box and how to get more towards that box, well, then I can also help seamlessly push them into a loan transaction right into there.
Yeah, a lot of the friction, I think, is because the borrowers have no visibility into what the capital markets love and sort of vice versa. And so if you can put a pipe between the two, people will get on the same page, and certain borrowers will gravitate towards the lowest cost of capital. Certain borrowers will have things that are important to them that cause them to choose a different capital product. But all of that can be informed by data.
And Eric, you have both a retail operational arm, and then you also predominantly work with third-party originators, right? So what those are kind of two different customers you have to look at. In that sense, you talked a little bit about that liquidity score, which sounds like you're at least giving them some of those fundamental data points at least. What other things do you take and give away for free, and why?
Well, first of all, I mean, the liquidity score is something that borrowers have actually thanked us, especially when we're talking larger properties. They say, wow, thank you for giving me the insight on this market. I was about to do a deal. I don't think I want to do this deal anymore. Thank you for showing me that, this property may sit on the market for a long time. And I didn't really get that because a lot of people in this industry say, I've got a deal. It fits the box. It fits the LTC, LTV, ARLTV criteria. Let's get it done. Let's do it. But they don't realize that it
may not sell.
There's that other dimension, which is, will the collateral eventually move? So that is definitely one piece of data that we've started providing systematically. I think we have a lot of work to do, frankly, in building out systems and providing a lot more. Another that we've been providing is trigger data to our clients, right, to help them understand when their borrowers are looking for credit. Of course,
unpack that term. What's trigger data mean?
Trigger data means when their borrower is applying for a loan, the credit bureaus report that data. We want to offer that service to our broker and lender clients to show them when their borrowers are
So
looking
if I
for credit.
understand that the chain there is, you've got a third-party originator, they've brought you a transaction already from this particular individual, you've now seen on a credit bureau, oh, by the way, this same party is looking for,
Yeah,
is
so we
clearly
just give
opened up
them
credit. You may want to reach out to this guy because it looks like he's shopping again right now.
Exactly.
Got it.
Although things are changing where commercial lenders in our space are no longer doing hard pulls, so that triggers are not happening, so you have to look for different kinds of triggers, but things are constantly evolving and changing as well. But I think the platforms that win are those that provide their borrowers with the most amount of data, to be frank. The more, you want to log into a platform and really get a feel for your portfolio, for the industry that you play in, right? You really want to know how it's all working, and the platform that conquers that, or that's able to provide that data, really conquers the space.
In kind of taking it to the next level, right? So let's just look at operations for a second, which is an area where I think people probably don't think of data that much. So when there's two components of this that I kind of want to parse through. So the first one is can it play a role at all in terms of hiring, staffing? Like, is it relevant at all, and how would you apply it in those areas?
I'll take it first. Just the sales tactic of telling someone not to do a deal in this space has been like the most powerful thing we can do. They're used to the YouTube guru saying, do every deal and you'll retire on this yacht, and so it's kind of a breath of fresh air when we tell them not to. I think the short answer to your question is absolutely across a number of fronts. We are a little bit of a different org design. We're fully remote, about 75 employees now, close to 30 states, and so when we post a job description, for example, we'll get a couple thousand applications in 48 hours, and we have to use data to sort through those. And
what are you doing? I mean, how are you sifting through them?
I mean, we have application questions and filters, that narrow the 2,000 down to 300. That will then screen the resumes and pick 20 and then run them through a process, and like it's a very structured, part of the business, because it has to be, one, to hire fast, and two, to make good decisions without just getting totally overwhelmed. Once they are on the team, right, and because they're remote, you can't really measure input. It's just doesn't work, right? Measuring mouse clicks is not effective. You need to measure output. And so SLAs around underwriting turnaround times and processing and like the whole factory and every step on the conveyor belt.
So let's pull on that, because I'm sure a lot of people here have remote employees. So other than mouse clicks, how are you going to track them? What are the metrics you're going to gauge them against?
So completion of relevant tasks along the process. And so, for an underwriter, for example, needs to complete a final review 48 hours ahead of closing, and that's sort of the average, the target time. And then the underwriter, has a team, and there's members on that team, and some are performing above the average, some are below the average. We can then sort of coach and train the folks that need work. And so it's really this, output measurement kind of management style that we frankly have to employ, because I think it's the only way that it works remotely. When you don't really know what everyone's doing, you need to really just, are they being productive or not? I think it's actually a better way to manage generally.
Right, because otherwise you're a micromanager.
Yeah, it's like a butts and seats thing, and it's like,
who cares about whether they're clicking away at the end of the day? Are they performing upon their required benchmarks? Is the ultimate test.
Exactly.
But can you actually effectively measure it? So how do you institutionalize the measurement side of that? And how do you actually, what tools are you going to use to make sure that you can track the performance?
We're really heavy into ticketing. And so ticketing is something that engineers use when they are figuring out, scoping the work that they want to do. And you can open the ticket and close the ticket, and each ticket's worth a number of story points, and those are supposed to indicate time. And so we've taken ticketing and apply it, through all different parts of the.
So, and let's walk through that. So let's say, for example, is a loan file is open, and then it has to hit stage 1 or whatever that stage 1 is like. And so there's a logged event every single time they're moving along. So you're literally getting like a timeline horizon. Hey, this event has occurred. This event occurred. Here's the person who made this event occur. So you're picking up on all the data points along the way on that timeline. Is that kind of a way to understand it?
That's right. There's the handoffs that happen, and so this baton was handed off here, and then this person handed it off here, and we've actually got like a bunch of different Slack channels, which may scare people to hear a bunch of Slack channels because it's a little chaotic. But all these milestones are kind of memorialized, and so someone can go back and say, all right, this application came in here, the term sheet was approved here, the handoff to processing occurred here, closing occurred here, draw 1, 2, 3, 4, repayment. And so everyone in the company can see all of these milestones happening with all the deals at any given time.
Got it. And what about you, Eric?
So a very simple concept in business school, you learn it in your sort of operations management class, that is throughput. So what is throughput? It's how many things can you get through in a certain period of time, right? How many tasks can you get through? How many loans can you get through? And how many people are required? So the more people you add, theoretically, the better the throughput.
And have you found a linearity in that approach in terms of is it truly a just use loans as the output as an example? Have you been able to find some linearity between, yep, we need another underwriter for X number of loans we hit, or what is, or how has that evolved for you?
Well, I think in my company we developed what we call a pulse report. I think people became very angry at me when I insisted that it was sent every 15 minutes. So we would just send an email to everyone in the company, and it would say, okay, this guy is doing this throughput in this much time, and so on.
Wait,
and
so you were literally sending an email to everybody in your company every 15 minutes, basically telling them how everybody else is performing in that 15 minutes?
Well, that's what a pulse is. So that email now goes out once an hour, not every 15 minutes, but it is measuring in a politically correct way the throughput of various elements of our process, right? So we're essentially running a factory, right? If you listen to some interviews about Tesla or whatever, and when they were having problems in the factory, what was he doing? He was going from station to station and figuring out, well, what are the issues with throughput of this station? Right? Because everything depends on, the performance of the whole machine depends on the throughput of each station. And so I think for any business, you can create basic measures of throughput. You don't need the most advanced technology, although I will say technology is helpful. So you get to the point where you can measure things down to a click, right? You know how many clicks it takes to complete a task on average. You can really make it a science. But I think in general, high level, you can start to figure out how many people does it take to do this many loans, and how many people do I need to, right? You can start making sort of basic calculations as to how many people you need to hire to get to where you want to be.
And is that preemptive in nature for you? I mean, do you just kind of do you effectively almost get flagged at this point of saying, yep, hey guys, but based on how volumes are producing, we probably need to put out an ad right now for 5 more underwriters because that's where the trend line's showing, or what does that look like for you?
We're more scientific now, so we're building up a bench of people so that we always have some spare capacity in all departments. Before it was, to be frank, intuition, right? We use a lot of intuition. I think we need more people there in that department. There's a lot of screaming happening. It's really nice to be able to be more scientific about it.
And let's go to a pain point of your real estate investors, which is the construction draws specifically. So why don't you, because that's a really heavy data-driven component of your businesses as well. So what have you done to what data have you brought in, and what process have you brought in to make that process go smoother?
Well, so many of these sub-processes that we have can be broken down into elements, and really technology can help take things that used to take a week to accomplish to a matter of minutes at this point. Like a construction draw with third-party inspections used to take a week or two. Now we have a self-inspect feature. I mean, construction draws are typically same day. The analysis of scopes of work, getting a human to analyze a scope of work. Well, if you're able to bucket the expenses into various line items, you can sort of weed out problems up front. One typical problem is front running, right? When a borrower assigns a lot of expense to the demolition, right? In the early stages, what are they really trying to do? They're really trying to get as much money as possible as quickly up front. These are really savvy borrowers, right? So if you can quickly analyze a report and say, before the loan gets into later stages of underwriting, and the borrower of course gets pissed off and says, you already approved this scope of work. If you can catch those things earlier on using data, right? You can move the loan along quicker and be more transparent with the borrower.
What is kind of, from your perspective, a great borrower experience today? What does that look like on a construction draw? What do you think is the appropriate amount of time it takes from funding request to funding to funding of the draw.
What is the appropriate time to fund the construction draw? It's 24 hours or less.
Yeah.
That's becoming industry standard. I mean, Amazon has an industry standard at this point. You get your stuff in a day or two, right? Amazon Prime. The same thing is happening in our business. I mean,
The one-click checkout is pretty revolutionary, and then once you experience it, anything else is frustrating.
I mean, from a UX perspective, I think the one-click checkout, when you go on Amazon and you click buy now and like it's done, you don't have to do anything else. I think their sales went up some 60% or something within a short period of time once they made that button available. So there are definitely parallels in every industry, and there are in our industry as well.
Supplementing the kind of conveyor belt conversation, something I think everyone can do, and it's data, but it doesn't take a data science team, is, the business is a big funnel, right, from the very top, and there's a bunch of different stages that have conversions, application to term sheet to processing to close, et cetera. And each time a deal doesn't make it, to the next stage in the funnel, you should be recording, in a broad enough category that things can fit into that bucket, why that happened. And then you can look at where you have an issue with your funnel and you can go and fix that specific issue. So that's something that we obsess over, and the hard part is just getting in the discipline of taking the extra step of, hey, this deal didn't come through. Was it because credit, liquidity, appraisal, what was the issue?
Yeah.
And then where to spend resources.
And so the next category we'll jump into as well, this will be our last one. We'll hopefully leave a couple of minutes here as well for questions. I'm sure people will have questions for particularly the two of you. The category we'll go in here is customer service, right, and customer success here. So, I spoke to you all a second ago about how, I have that great predicament of why did it grow 74% year over year, but I also have just as I'm sure many of you have, is, well, why did this customer leave? Right? Like, what happened? Why did they go to a competitor? And so, one of the things that we track internally on this side is we have a report that generates automatically, and it's got a timeline tracker to it, which is month to date, the last 3 months, the last 6 months, which is look at those time periods and look at the current customers and look at, did any of their volumes decline by 20% over any of those 3 periods? And if so, send me an email and tell me who. Right, that's the kind of the crux of it, and then so you can jump in front of that right away and say, hey, just checking in, what's going on with your business? Right, I want to make sure that you're taken care of, and then we subscribe to Forecast as well, so we can quickly figure out did they actually go to a competitor? Did they switch the documentation? Well, we're probably going to figure out what documentation did they go to, and same thing for you all, right? Which is who your real estate investors are. You could subscribe similar to a Forecast or otherwise, but are you actually tracking and understanding the average number of transactions this person has provided, following up with them quickly if that number falls down, and having some sort of data tool scraping, sitting there and actually understanding whether it's going down. So that's what we're doing. What are you all doing to measure customer success?
Well, one of the cool tools, once we were able to get most of the communication that happens in our company within a portal, you then have thousands of messages to analyze. So first of all, one thing we look at is how quickly are we able to respond to messages in our portal? Like when a client types something, how quickly can we respond back? And we're trying to suppress that.
What is the benchmark that you have for that?
I mean, my benchmark is
not the Eric Abramovich benchmark, but the reasonable rock one.
A reasonable one is probably 1 to 2 hours, but some people actually interpret these message things as a chat, so they expect an immediate response, and 1 hour is actually too much for them. But let's be realistic, an hour is pretty reasonable. But the other thing that we built once we had that was a sentiment tracking tool. So we can actually sense that it's like an quasi-AI tool that can sense when clients are upset, and typically they use words that express that they're upset, curses or whatever it is.
How many F words were in this sentence?
So, I mean, if you optimize 2 things, 1, the time that you get back to them, and 2, the sentiment, over time, right? If the sentiment is generally good, and if your response time is generally very quick, over time, that's just going to pay dividends, and so we're tracking that.
And so you've got some sort of AI bot sitting, so you've got a centralized messaging system, and there's some sort of AI application that's basically reading every single message and basically identifying to you, saying, hey, by the way, we're noticing that this sentiment's going in the wrong direction.
Of course, like, it may not always be the greatest measure, because the people that scream the loudest are the ones that get the attention, but that may not be so having data doesn't mean that
Sure.
you still have to interpret it properly. I find that in our system, one flaw is that if you scream the most, you're going to get the most attention, and that's probably not well, it's not necessarily the best way to go about the whole thing, but that's how it works today. And so yeah, we're tracking message count, sentiment, and response time.
I think this customer success part of the business, one, it's hugely important. We've got highly repetitive customers, so making sure that they're, more than satisfied in the entire end-to-end experience, from, in our case, downloading the app through loan repayment and everything in between. I think, of all the areas where, if I was thinking about this earlier, we were at a VC LP day, and they all want you to have the slide that's like, how are you going to use AI? Because like that's the thing that they're raising money around and they all care about. This customer success avenue, I think there's actually a lot of material traction and examples of companies in other sectors that have made a bunch of progress. I don't know if people know Klarna. They're like a buy now, pay later.
You said Klarna?
Klarna.
Okay.
Yeah, they published information that they used. They trained a ChatGPT model to be their customer success agent, and it offset like 700 jobs, took the response time down from 12 minutes to 2 minutes, NPS went up, and the thing speaks like 14 different languages. And so on all measures of success, it's doing, significantly well. I had a conversation with the chief revenue officer there, and he was like, yeah, the only reason that we put 700 jobs is because we didn't want to scare people. It's actually going to be much, much more. It's extremely powerful. And so the reason that it works for them, and I think that this will happen in a lot of industries, ours included, is the underlying SOPs are written in such a way that the LLM can digest it and spit it back out in a way that makes sense to the consumer, and then putting up guardrails around the same. So I think of sort of all the the LLM hype, this sort of customer success, the chatbot type feature is the one that's primed to get traction.
Real adoption, yeah.
Yeah.
Do either of you guys kind of rely on your classic either NPS directly to the Net Promoter Score to your either your TPO originators or your actually and investors? I mean, are you using outside firms to ever do any surveying work for you? And what are you doing to actually track how you're doing and measure that?
We have definitely started tracking our Net Promoter Score for our brands, and it's something that we've started to optimize, and we've had a lot of traction in moving the scores up.
Are you just using the classic question of, would you refer or would you recommend us to your
like
friend or whatever it is?
That is industry standard for Net Promoter Score. I mean,
Right.
I'm sure there are tons of other measures, but that's a very basic, simple measure.
Sure.
Although I would say that in the lending space, a lot of people are angry, and it has nothing to do with your process. They're just angry they couldn't get a loan, they had a bad loan, or they had bad credit, and that's
so how do you weed out the noise? Because I don't really care. In fact, I'm happy I lost your business or never got your business from your perspective.
There's a little noise, I'd say, that you may not have in other industries in this space because of that, but it is what it is, right? I mean,
Right. But I'm assuming you also segment out between that as well, because that's your applications, right? So of applications, how did we do? But then there's also of closed loans, and I'm assuming there's a segmentation of how did we do here.
we do have someone monitoring the NPS score, and if there are bad data points that are unrelated to our process, or just an angry person that with low credit complaining that they couldn't get a loan, like we'll strip that out of the calculation.
Do you do this internally as well? Do you have your people rank you on an NPS at all? Your employees?
Our employees, we do have a ranking system. So the client has a star ranking system. It's sort of like an Uber, right? So after you take an Uber, you can rank the Uber driver. In our portal, you can rank anyone that's working on your file. and so everyone's got like a 1 to 5 star.
Do you also send this
rate.
in by email every
We
15
don't-
minutes, letting them know their current their current rock score?
So this is all very controversial at the moment, and so only the managers see it for now.
For
but
now.
with
Famous last words.
for now.
We haven't implemented, the simple, would you recommend us? There's a lot of different things happening, right? There's the tech product, and then there's the draw process.
That's right.
Right, and so like, what's your NPS or the draw process is one thing, but that's entirely disconnected from the tech product.
Right. This big bucket NPS score of Backflip is probably a fairly irrelevant score from your perspective, which is I really want to understand is what, I mean, and that's kind of what you did anyways, but that's your Uber scoring, right? Which is I actually want to get down to the at the end of the day is I have individual performance that I'm really trying to change and track.
Yeah.
And
on the tech side, it's like, are people coming back and using the product? Right, like that speaks more volume than anything.
That's right. That's right.
Actions speak louder than words, and then your closing experience. There's a feedback survey, so there's surveys kind of built in along the way.
Right.
But I mean the voice of the customer and getting feedback.
have either of you ever chosen to go outside of your organizations to try to get elicit that sort of feedback, or has it always just been internal data tracking for you?
Actually, I think I get phone calls all the time from some surveying companies about the Jurassic conferences. Do you? I think you all use companies to
Do we?
survey. I
have no
believe
idea.
so. I'm pretty sure I've
People
gotten
ask me
calls
lots of
asking.
questions about like I always have I'm effectively an attendee at my own conference. I don't know. There's lots of things that they do, and God bless them. They're very good people, but I don't know what they do most of the time.
Well, it definitely helps. I just got this awesome chocolate in my room
Did
from
you
the
really?
Jurassic
It
conference.
must
It's
have
like
been a
this
mistake.
whole wind kind of tower made out of chocolate. It's really nice.
Did you all get chocolate towers? Is this like an Eric? No, I
I think
didn't get.
for-
I
I-
sure as heck didn't get a chocolate tower. I assure you that much.
Probably did it for all the sponsors here, but yeah, I mean, in the scheme of things, probably if I get a survey from you all, I'm probably going to say, hey, they're really good and really professional, and the chocolate definitely swayed my opinion a bit.
We don't bribe.
we don't. You guys are more advanced. We don't use third-party companies to survey our borrowers,
don't
but
know
it's
if we
not a
do.
bad idea.
I don't know if we do, honestly. I'll find out. I'll have to go and find out after this. So with that, thank you guys very much. And I want to make sure you guys probably have much better questions than I do. So anyone in the audience feel brave enough that want to just kind of stand up and shout out anything you want to know. Like I said, these guys are incredible minds when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Softball's encouraged.
Yeah, exactly. Anything that'll make them look good. All right.
Data is fun.
Yeah. No. Well, thank you all. We've got.
Oh, I think we had a question here.
Yeah.
So I recently started seeing a lot of backflip marketing online. So are you a hard money lender, or is it? I just wanted to figure out your structure and how long the company is.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate the question for those that were not able to hear. So you recently started seeing Backflip content online or whatever, and you're just kind of like, are you a lender? What are you? What is this thing? Are you kind of tell us a little bit more about kind of how long you've been around and what the business is.
Yeah, so we are. We started originating loans in 2021, and we did, I think it's $4 million in 2021, $35 million in 2022, 135 in 2023. I think we're past 150 year to date already, and so are growing pretty quickly. We've just started to spend online, digital marketing, like last 4 months or so, and so that's probably why you're just seeing us. I'm glad that it's making it in front of you.
Do you guys plan on doing broker channel, or is it all retail? You have your own loan officers?
We have our own loan officers. It's all sort of direct to borrower, although a handful of brokers have found their way onto our app, and we're like, this person's submitting a shitload of applications, and it's like, oh, they're a broker. And so we do partner with those folks. It's just not an active effort.
Great. Well, appreciate you all. All good. Appreciate you all. I'm assuming there's probably another panel coming up after us, and then we've got cocktail hour, I think, beginning at 5 o'clock. But otherwise, thank you guys for all coming. Hopefully you're getting good value here.